Hello guys, Filament 4 beta is out and there are quite a few changes in the default form and table resource that I want to show you. I want to show you 5 differences that may actually surprise you because if you work with Filament 3, there are a few things that will be in different place, in different syntax. So let's compare this resource in Filament 4 versus this resource in Filament 3 that I've loaded with PHP Storm. And yes, for the record, I use both Cursor and PHP Storm depending on the task. Until in September, my PHP Storm license is expired and then I will try to make a decision whether to continue. Anyway, Filament 4 beta. When you run PHP Artisan make Filament resource, here are the things that may be different. First, navigation icon syntax. This is how it looks in Filament 3, and this is how it looks in Filament 4. It's longer and it has different types, including backed enum. Why is that? Because then you are allowed to use hero icons with enum like this. So instead of having strings and trying to remember what was that hero icon dash whatever, now you can do hero icon and then choose from the list or find, I don't know, briefcase or whatever. For that behavior, the type of that navigation icon should be like this, string, null, or backed enum, instead of just question mark string in Filament 3. The next change in Filament 3, you were used to have form and table in the same resource. In Filament 4, it's spread out into more files. So there are still form and table methods in the main resource, but they are separated into machine form and machines table. And machine form is a class inside of resources, then resource itself, schemas, and then called machine form. But inside it's the same schema components with all the inputs you're familiar with. It's just that Filament 4 is refactored into schemas everywhere for that to be reused elsewhere. So it's easier to build the custom page with forms and info lists and table all at once. For now, I don't have the working example and I will cover that in the future videos. But basically the word schema is reused in Filament 4 as a new concept that is reusable. Now the table is in the tables machines table, also separate folder, so schemas and tables are separate folders. But here, again, the same syntax of table, columns, filters, and everything is just separated to a separate class. And also with that, if we take a look at the general structure of that folder of resource, there's resources, then resource itself. Then inside we have schemas, tables, pages, and the resource itself inside of the same folder of the resource. Remember in Filament 3, much smaller font on PHP Storm in the sidebar, but we have this. Filament resources, then resource prefix or suffix for the folder, then resource on one level, and then pages inside one level deep. So the new Filament 4 has different structure with maybe the possibility to copy and paste the full resource folder elsewhere to another project if you wish. I'm not sure if that's the reason, but it's actually making a lot of sense. But this whole thing, the structure, is actually configurable. In the upgrade guide, there's a section publishing the configuration file, so you can publish this, and there are flags to enable the old behavior of Filament 3. So if you have this flag, embedded panel resource schemas, then it would define the forms and info list inside of the resource class instead of separate classes. Similarly, panel resource tables, table inside of the resource class instead of being separate. And also resource classes outside of directories is also configurable. Also, there's a flag about cluster, but we won't talk about clusters in this video, and also partial imports. This is also interesting because in Filament 3 we have those so-called partial imports. So there's forms components every time, and on top we have imported Filament forms like this. Similarly, tables columns, on top we have Filament tables namespace. In Filament 4 you will have only the class name here, which I like a lot personally because the code is shorter and is focused on the actual behavior of that column or that input. So the same thing in the form here, text input and toggle, and on top you have text input specifically specified in full class name instead of just namespace. Similarly with the table you have actions here and columns here up to the actual class name instead of just namespace. Side note, it's more convenient to me to potentially shoot YouTube shorts because now the code actually could fit in the vertical of the YouTube short. But yeah, even that one is configurable. We get back to the same upgrade guide. So partial imports is actually what that means. If you want to go back to the old Filament 3 way, it is configurable. And the final thing I want to show you as an important change that you may notice is, did you notice edit action, delete action, and bulk action group? On top, we have namespace, filament actions for all of those actions. Do you remember in Filament 3 and even before, we had a situation where you need to add an action? In the table, for example, we have same edit actions, and here we have namespaces, but the namespace is tables actions. So there were table actions and other actions and even more actions, and you wouldn't even know what action comes from, and there were confusions in tutorials even. So in all my videos and demos, I had to specify and clarify which action comes from which namespace, because if the unexperienced developer just put action and then autocomplete with IDE, that ID autocomplete may be referencing different namespace, and then of course the feature doesn't work. So yeah, in Filament 4, all actions are, well, filament actions, not table actions, not other actions. Again, with more testing and with more projects, we will find out whether that actually works smoothly 100%. And remember, the version is still in beta, so you report if you find something related to actions. But the goal is clear and great: to simplify the meaning of the multi-meaningful word action into one. So yeah, these were just 5 changes that I've noticed just from comparing blindly Filament 4 versus Filament 3. Of course, there are many more changes and I will shoot more videos about them. But at this time, if you want to try Filament 4 beta, there are 2 resources to go. Is upgrade guide if you're upgrading from Filament 3, which is relatively straightforward if you don't have any custom stuff, and also read the article on content section of Filament PHP website written by Leandro, a feature overview with quite a huge list of new things. And of course, read the Filament docs. In the documentation section on top, you may choose version 4.x beta. I would expect it to come out stable out of beta by the end of the summer, and then I will have new portion of videos with a stable version and a lot of updated projects. So subscribe to the channel to get all of those. And what do you think about those new changes about forms and tables? Let's discuss in the comments below. That's it for this time, and see you guys in other videos.